back to our channel. Found out the day after Christmas, I was 3 months postpartum after having Remy, that we were pregnant.
Which we say it kind of sarcastically, but we were really excited about it. So
we were very excited about it. When we film our Q&A, I have like the clip of me finding out and then telling Derek that I was pregnant. So I'll share. I've never shared that anywhere. But yeah. So, anyways, we found out that we were pregnant again, and goodness. Being pregnant during a pandemic was interesting. It did not affect us as much as it affected other people, because we knew going into it that Derek was not going to do as much as he did when I was pregnant with Remy, because it was just going to be too much to take 2 little kids to every appointment and every ultrasound. And so thankfully we already had that mindset going into it. If it had happened during Remy's pregnancy, it would have been a lot harder, because everything was new and everything was first for us. And even for my anatomy ultrasound, they would not allow Derek in if he had even wanted to go.
Because that was still during the spike, or like the summer spike. I guess we've had a couple.
So anyways, we wanted to kind of share our labor and delivery story with this guy.
He was born August 25th, 7 pounds, 10 ounces, 20.5 inches long.
Yeah, so 3 ounces bigger than Remy, which was kind of shocking because he looked smaller, and he always felt smaller when I was pregnant.
But the same height.
Yeah. So anyways, because we filmed our labor and delivery story with Remy and it was very traumatic, we felt like it was only right for us to film this story because it was very, very different. So, leading up to Oakley is his name. Leading up to Oakley being born, we had, like, after Remy's birth, I was like, I'm never being induced again. That was a horrible experience. But everyone like gets to being like 32, 33, 34 weeks pregnant, and you start being like, is this ever going to end? I just want, like, you know, you're just uncomfortable. So we had started entertaining the idea of being induced again.
So just a short recap on Remy's birth. We were induced at 39 weeks because they said he was really big. Obviously he was not.
I had had prodromal labor for 10 weeks leading up to that point. And
then when we were trying not to do an epidural, not that we were against them, we were just trying not to do it at first. They broke her water. As soon as they did, he got caught on her pelvic bone, and that caused some excruciating pain. And then that pain was there.
For 2.5 hours, 3 hours. My epidural didn't work. It was just really, it was a horrible experience. Then I had a bleed afterwards, and it was just very, very traumatic, very, very painful. And so leading into Oakley's birth, I was really trying not to think about it. We hired our doulas again, which honestly at this point are just our friends. But you know, we were just doing a lot of like positive affirmations, and just like, I switched OBs because I didn't want to deliver at the same hospital. They recommended an OB that was just, he was just the best. He was so great.
And then she also went to the chiropractor from 30 weeks on?
30 weeks on,
just to make sure that we tried to get her pelvis aligned where he could come out a whole lot better than Remington did.
We really did just as much as we could leading up. I once again started dilating super early. I did have prodromal labor, but not anything like I did with Remy. It was like 5 weeks. And
they were not nearly as intense.
No, but I also had been through labor before.
I guess that's true. So
there were definitely some times where I was like, wait a minute, is this it? But it also was like, with 2 small kids, at the end of the day when the contractions would come, like with Remy, we would get out and walk and like try to get him out. But we were like, we're going to bed.
We gotta go.
I can't stay up. I went into my 38-week appointment. I was 38 weeks and 2 days. And at this point, everybody was concerned at how fast my labor was going to go once I went into labor, because my induction with Remy was only 10 hours. So,
and we were pregnant within a year again.
Right.
So, like,
and they say second labors can sometimes go faster. And so my doctor was very concerned at that point. At my 38-week appointment, I was between 4 and 5 centimeters. And he was just very concerned that I was just going to go into labor at home, and that because of the prodromal labor, I wasn't going to know that it was actual labor until it was too late, and then we were delivering a baby on the side of the road or at home or whatever. He wanted at that point to just send me to the hospital. He said, let's just go ahead and send you over. I was having small contractions, nothing crazy. And he said, you know, we'll just go ahead and keep you and we'll get the induction started. And I just didn't want to be induced at that point.
Right.
So
we had the talk way before that when we were trying to plan. Obviously you can't plan it, right? But like just having thoughts on what we were doing is we didn't mind to use an induction to help the process, but we wanted it to start on its own.
Right, yeah. I've never been against like using Pitocin in the middle of labor to like get your contractions more consistent or like whatever it is.
So we had a hard time with that thought.
Of like just go
to an induction because of the experience.
And I was 38 weeks and 2 days, and so it just was like, so anyway, so we agreed to let him do a membrane sweep. So everybody was under the impression that that was going to do it, but they were also under the impression that that was going to happen with Remy, and it didn't. The membrane sweep at 39 weeks did nothing. So anyways, we decided to go and walk around the mall. We had Ellie and Remy, and I'd say within an hour I was like, wait a minute. This, like, it wasn't necessarily that the contractions were getting worse or more frequent. I just felt very different. So we came home, we called my doula. She went ahead and came, because at that point we were thinking that maybe we would go in the next day if the contractions were still going.
Right. And again, our doula is fantastic. So she came down, you know. She was like, if anything, I'll just spend the night at your house. So we did several different things to try to get the contractions more consistent. They tried to patter out a little bit. Die down.
Yeah, die down a couple of different times. And so we were actually using the pumping method to get contractions more consistent, and it worked.
Right.
So we went into the hospital at 10
p.m.
10 that night. I had the membrane sweep at 11 that morning.
And I mean, because of the prodromal labor we've had, she has always been well, I don't know that they're strong enough, or I don't know that they're...
So I kept pushing it off. And they wanted to go in at like 5 o'clock, and I was like, no. And
she was also worried because Ellie and Remy weren't in bed, and my parents were still driving down, and all of this mother stuff the parent stuff that we have to deal with, which I was okay with. I was like, okay, we'll get them in bed. We'll wait till my parents are pretty close. Yeah. Our neighbor came and sat with the monitors until my parents got here. But then at 10, they were picking up pretty heavily, and the doula and I were like, we can't wait. Like, we don't want to be delivering this baby at home, so we've got to go. Right.
So we got to the hospital. I had already had a COVID test the Saturday prior. This was a Tuesday. Monday. And so we already knew that my COVID test was negative, so things went a little bit faster than they probably would have originally. And so we got up to triage. They checked me. I was at least a 5.
Yeah.
And was having consistent contractions, and so they admitted us, and we kind of just labored for a little while. I don't even know when I got my epidural.
So we were in our actual labor and delivery room by 11:30 at night. The nurses we had were fantastic. They brought us a peanut ball and, just a medicine ball to...
I can insert some pictures.
Yeah.
I labored on the toilet for a long time because that's supposed... it does help, but it's not comfortable. And my doula is just so great to have, you know, all of these different positions you can see in the pictures that we went through.
Right.
I was dealing with everything really, really well, but I was terrified of my water breaking. Like, terrified. Because that is when everything changed with Remy. Right. And so I decided to go ahead and get an epidural because I didn't want my water to just break.
Right. She decided to get the epidural because her contractions were getting even stronger. And it wasn't that she couldn't handle those contractions. She was just scared of the pain from the pelvic pain that she had before. So around 3:30 in the morning, we decided to get the epidural.
Looking back now, I wish that I hadn't. Because I did not have the pelvic pain, because he didn't get stuck like Remy did, I wish that I had the courage to push through and to just do it without, because I could have continued going. Like he said, it wasn't that the contraction pain, I mean, it's not fun, but I like being able to move around and do different things. So anyways, got the first epidural. It was horrific. It was horrible. She didn't have the right length of needle for some reason, and she was trying to use too short of a needle, and I mean, I was sobbing. I mean, epidurals are never comfortable, but with Remy, like, it was just uncomfortable, and then it was done. With this, I almost can feel the pain right now.
She had too short of a needle, and she was the only anesthesiologist there. We went to a much smaller hospital, so they didn't have like nurse anesthetist or whatever. It was just the anesthesiologist there. And she tried to place it, and she was like, it might be in, it might not, let's give it 30 minutes. 30 minutes goes by. It definitely worked. It worked the way that Remy's worked. And I think at that point too, I was like, oh my gosh. My worst fear is coming true. I'm gonna have to go through all of this without a working epidural again. I mean, I don't think that I showed it as much, but I was scared. I was like, oh, because I knew what was coming. You know, the first time around, you don't know. You don't know what the pain's going to be like. You don't know what the sensations are going to feel like. And this time, I knew what was coming. So they tried the first time with too short of a needle. It didn't work. We called the anesthesiologist back in. She checked the nearby supply room. Still couldn't find the needle that she needed. So she tried to just readjust it. At this time, we had another sobbing session because it's not a pleasant experience getting an epidural, and she had been digging around in her back for a while.
That's not just like a placing it and you're done. It's like moving it around, like, it's horrible.
So then we gave it some more time, and then we called the anesthesiologist in the third time, and we said, like, we're going to try it again. But she had found a needle. She had went downstairs to the OR and found the needle that she needed and brought it back up.
That was at that point was a really hard decision for me, because they're all standing there and they're like, do you want to try again, or do you want to just go without? And I didn't know how you even begin to make that decision, because I was like, in my mind, I finally was like, okay, this pain of getting the new epidural is temporary, but I know that the pain of going through labor lasts for a long time. So we went with it, and it did work.
Yeah, she got it perfectly placed that time.
Yeah, like I didn't even like through.
And I don't even think you had much pain because she didn't have to dig. She had a.
Right, like, I mean, it was still uncomfortable, but no, nothing.
But it wasn't like that. I'm trying to get it in place with too short of tools, right? So the third one worked, and
they came in, broke my water. I got my epidural, and they broke my water at 7 centimeters. So I made it, to 7 centimeters without anything.
Then we took a little nap because we were all tired.
Which was the relief in me. I mean, after they broke my water, I probably didn't breathe for a solid few minutes because I was just waiting. Because with Remy, I mean, that pain hit just as soon as they broke my water. And so every minute would go by and I was like, okay, like I'm still feeling okay. Everything's okay. So that helped a lot. So yeah, we decided I didn't sleep at all, but Derek and my doula.
I took like a 30-minute nap, but it was just nice to like lay down and just like relax, right? So then we did, that was probably, we probably rested for 2 hours.
Yeah, it was a good little while.
And then when we all woke up,
they came in and
the nurse came in and checked you. Because it was time for the doctors to switch and the nurses to switch, so they had to do all of their evaluations again. And I think you were a 9.
Right.
Then. No, what was it? This time they never, until the very end, they were like, we can't tell what you are because
I was so soft and stretchy.
Right.
Yeah.
So they were like, we're at least going to give you an 8, but you could be more, I think is what happened at that time. And then we kind of changed positions again because even though she was that dilated and that thinned out and effaced, he was still super bouncy and palatable. He wasn't engaged completely. So we tried some different positions.
Yeah.
And then eventually we rolled on...
No, so they came back... I feel like when they checked me and I would... No, so they checked me and I was a 9 in the morning. And they said that part of my... There was still a part of my cervix that was still there. So they rolled me on my right side.
And gave you the peanut ball.
And gave me the peanut ball in between my legs. And I was like, you know, a contraction came and I was like, oh, I'm really uncomfortable. And everybody kept saying, let us know when you feel pressure. Tell us when you feel pressure. And they had she had literally just checked me right before they rolled me over. And she was like, he's super high. You still have part of your cervix there. Like, we're gonna have to do some more positions. I'm like, okay, whatever, fine. At this point, it was like 8:30 in the morning. So I hadn't been there for that long. Right. So I roll over on my side and I'm like, I feel pressure. And they're like, the nurse was like, okay, I can check you if you like really want me to check you. But you could tell that she was just like, I just checked you. So by the time she's checked me, I've gone through like 3 contractions and I'm like, no, something's happening. Something, it feels different. Right.
I mean, that's what you kept saying. No, like it's not hurting, because we kept saying, is it hurting? Like the contractions are getting stronger, or is it pressure? And you at first you were like, well, maybe it's the contractions, and then eventually you were like, no, it's like pressure. Something's different. So then the nurse was like, okay, let's check, and we'll probably do a practice push.
So she checked me and she was like, don't move.
Yeah.
That baby's coming out. So she called my doctor and she was like, okay, you know, we're ready for you. And so he came. At this point, my body was pushing. Like, I wasn't pushing, but he was coming out.
Right. We were to the point that the body involuntarily...
Right. My body was like, okay, like he's ready to go. Let's go. Like, which was just such... Right. And all through Oakley's pregnancy, I was really reading up on, like, I don't want to say natural childbirth because that makes it sound like going pain medicine free, right? But just like how your body does things on its own and how your body knows what to do. And so I knew about this, I forget what it's
fetal called. Ejection reflex?
Yes, that's what it is.
Yeah. I know we were looking at it too, but that's the only reason I know.
So, you know, at this point, that's when my body just took over and it was like, come on, this baby's ready to come out. So my doctor walks in. And what did he say to the nurse?
Like, legit, we were still breaking the bed down when the doctor got there. And the doctor is just like a 10-minute walk away, maybe. And he got there and he was like, okay, let me check you. And he looks at the nurse and he was like, the next time you're this ready, you've got to tell me, like, you're this ready, because I would have ran. And from the time the doctor walked in the room to the time that he got gowned up and I got gowned up.
Oh yeah, because I caught the baby. Yeah.
By the time we both got our gowns on, it was maybe 5 minutes and we were going. Like,
I pushed twice. 2 times. And it was, I didn't have any pain.
Right.
I mean, of course, it wasn't anything strenuous because 2 pushes is nothing.
Right.
Derek got to catch him. They put him, you know, on my chest. Like, everything was just...
There was no afterbleed or anything like that. That distracted the whole...
I didn't tear. Like, everything was just straightforward. And then it was...
Easy?
Yeah, easy-ish. I mean, really, like, compared to Remy's birth, it was like...
Yeah.
night and day. So like I said, we say all of that to say, like, if you have a traumatic labor and delivery, if you have a labor and delivery that didn't go the way that you wanted it to, you can the next time have a night and day difference. Like, every pregnancy is different, every birth is different. It's not like your body just births that way, or, you know, like our after delivery wasn't great. He had to go to the Nicu for 5 days because he inhaled some fluid because he came flying out so
he did come out. So he came out with 2 pushes, right? And normally when you're pushing, it compresses their lungs and makes them expel the fluid that they have taken in while they're in utero. So that caused what they call partial pneumonia, and then also he was the diagnosis is transitional tachypnea of neonates, which he was just having some really labored breathing, and his oxygen,
like he was grunting with every breath. That was the first thing that everybody was like, wait a minute, this is normal.
So his oxygen levels were lower than to be expected, and then
he's got a lot to say.
And then his respiratory rate was higher, so he was really having to work to keep his oxygen levels up in his body. So they transitioned us to the mom and baby floor. Then that's when the grunting got worse. We let our nurse know. Then they called the NICU. The hospital we were at only had a level 2 NICU. Transferred him to the NICU that was at the hospital we were at, just for monitoring, because they said, 4 or 5 hours may go by and it'd be okay. Unfortunately, that was not the case, and they didn't have room or the real tools at that level of a NICU should he have gotten worse. They had what he needed for that moment, but and he actually did get a little worse even after they transferred us. So they transferred us from where we were at downtown Orlando, where they had their level 4 NICU. They put us there.
So he went first in the ambulance. They wouldn't let us go with him, which was just, oh my gosh, that day is such, not a blur, but just like,
there was a lot of
labor
emotion.
And delivery, and like it was so great, and I was on such a high of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it went so well, and now we have our baby, and then all of a sudden everything was changing, and like you never expect to have to go through that stuff, and especially in the like finding out stage, because you just don't know what's wrong. They're saying, well, it's probably just this and this and this, and you're like, yeah, but what if it's this and this and this? And so then, obviously your newborn baby, like he's going to be transferred to another hospital without you, like you just have to send your baby.
It's the scary thing. So he started to go down a little bit in the NICU there, so they were like, okay, let's get him somewhere in case, so then they bring this like scary NICU transport thing, like, and it looks like the scariest thing ever, that you're putting your little bitty newborn baby in there, and they're taking him away from you, and you can't ride with him and you can't go with them. And then we also, she was still admitted.
Well, yeah, because I had just given birth.
So
12 hours ago.
They were like, well, you can't leave until you're discharged. So then we had to call our practice, and our doctor was fantastic. He was like, yes, transfer her. Like, I'll put in the order. But then we had to wait until the medical transport could pick her up and transport her, because they couldn't just let her go with me where I can drive her up there. So we had to wait for that. So we waited for that, and we got to the hospital about 2 hours after he did. Then we got to the NICU.
We met everybody and kind of heard from everybody. Actually, while I was being transported, the doctor called me and just said, I really think he's going to be okay, but we need this, this, and this to happen. We spent the night there, and then I asked to be discharged the next morning. I wanted to be discharged that night. It was just because my labor and delivery was so easy. My body just, like, within 24 hours, I just didn't even feel like I had had a baby. It was also probably partially in my mind of, like, I don't have time to worry about how I'm feeling. I've got to take care of my baby.
in all reality, she passed all of the milestones very quickly, right? You've got to use the restroom, you got to pass gas, you've got to be able to stand, you've got to be able to eat.
Yeah, like that night when we got to the hospital, I walked from my room to it just So, anyways, we got through the 5 days
in the NICU. So we were originally told that we were probably only going to be there 48 hours. We, in fact, stayed for 5 days.
He had to be put on...
He was put on BiPAP and then CPAP.
Don't tell them
and then obviously when you go to the higher levels of the lung treatment or, you know, breathing treatments that they were doing, they've got to back you down slowly to make sure you can tolerate it. So we had to wait on all of that. And then labs.
And then they had decided to put it in the feeding tube because he was so weak when he first got there. And so then he had to like eat so much for 2 days. It was just like, you pass one step and they're like, okay, now this. And you're like, oh my God. But we're so grateful that he is okay and that it wasn't anything major. It was just something that he kind of had to work through and that they kept him safe. And then we came home and we've been a family of 5 for, what, today's November 6th?
November 6th. So over
two and a half
months. And also, like, to go back before, you know, when COVID hit, you were pregnant, I got to stay home, so that was a huge blessing for us. We were working from home, so I got to be home and not have a commute. And I mean, ultimately, you know, I could go out when things got a little bit crazy and been like, okay, guys, that's enough. Mom needs a rest, and we got to figure this out. What do we need?
Andy's been home since Oakley was born, and he should be home for the next 4 or 5 months.
While we do not like the virus, the situation that it has provided us has been helpful in this time of our lives.
But we hope that you guys enjoyed this video. We hope that you guys are doing well, and we will see you next time. Bye.